Showjumping, probably the most popular equestrian sport, in which some 80 countries now compete. With top prize money reaching $250,000 and horses costing up to $1.5 million, showjumping is big business, made possible only by commercial sponsorship. The sport attracts huge audiences, and television viewers for the big events run into billions. What is so compelling about the Grand Prix arena?
The sport, of course, is intrinsically very artificial, and people have sometimes asked me, how can you attach so much importance to the fact that you build these ridiculous artificial fences and then you jump them and he happens to jump them a second or 2 seconds faster or leaves one more of them up than you do, and that's a matter of very great consequence? Well, every sport is more or less artificial, and there's an endless fascination in the complex collaboration between the man and the horse. You have two different talents, two bodies, two temperaments, two different experiences with life. And of course, on the big day, you both have to synchronize absolutely perfectly. I can get up on the right side of my bed, but my horse has to get up on the right side of his stall as well.
Bill Steinkraus, individual gold medalist for the United States in 1968, and now chairman of the US equestrian team, has played a major role in helping America to rise to the forefront of this sport, and he is now recognized as a world authority on showjumping. Michael Matz, one of today's leading competitors who has won 4 gold medals in the Pan American Games, as well as a World Cup final, owes his early successes to his relationship with the brilliant Jet Run. Now he is building another strong partnership with Chef.
Welcome from Pennsylvania, superstar rider Michael Matz and Chef.
What exactly makes for a winning partnership?
Chef is a small horse. He's a little bit over 16 hands. Every time he goes in the ring, the fences are over his head. He's a horse that has a lot of courage. He has that little bit of fight in him that I think that makes him a good horse.
Michael Matz is a real perfectionist and a great stylist, and very few riders have ever made difficult things look so easy. In fact, sometimes people are disappointed the first time they watch him because they can't see him really doing anything, and they very rarely realize how fast he's going. But that's his art. He's still regulating every stride and every takeoff, but he's doing it all so skillfully that it seems to be just inevitable.
I'm maybe not a natural, but I work at it maybe a little bit harder. I try to be as consistent as possible. I'm not going to take real big chances. I'm not going to go crazy in a jump off. I'll do what I have to do. I'd rather always get a piece of a Grand Prix than 1 week win and never hear from me again in 6 months.
On the other side of the Atlantic, John Whittaker's partnership with the matchless Ryan's son took him to the top of the sport in Great Britain. He has since won medals at the Olympic Games, the World Championships, and the European Championships.
John Whittaker is a typical North Countryman, and it's been really fascinating to watch his development as a rider. In temperament, he's very strong and rather quiet. His first great collaboration was with Ryan's son, who was a real old-fashioned pattern of horse, and John rode him in a somewhat old-fashioned Northern Yorkshire way, with a long rein and long stirrups, and they won an awful lot together, including the individual silver medal at the 1980 alternate Olympics. Since then, John's developed an entirely new partnership with a very different kind of horse, Milton, and he's learned to ride him in a very different way, a somewhat more classical way, with a shorter stirrup and riding very much more forward. But no matter what he's riding, Johnny is certainly one of the very soundest riders in the world today.
Over in Germany, always a leading nation in this sport, few riders have had more success than Paul Schockermoeller, 3 times European champion and 5 times German national champion. He's especially well known for his partnership with the brilliant but unconventional Deister.
I know him quite well, how he reacts and so on, and he would try to jump fences, I believe for sure, which he couldn't jump if I would ask to. I believe he probably knows a little bit when it's important, when not, because he realized how I'm reacting, if I take the job serious or not.
By far the most individualistic of the world-class riders today is Paul Schockermoeller. Paul's favorite horse, Deister, is also sort of quirky. Sometimes Deister is twisting one way and Paul seems to be twisting the other to counterbalance him, and the result is unconventional, to say the very least. But they suit each other perfectly, and they've compiled a remarkable record in the major competitions.
To have a good mental rapport with your horse, it's exactly the same as having a rarely good marriage and understanding. You know when to throw your hat through the door or not. You know when you can make a noise or not. You know when you can talk seriously or not. Horses have lots of ways of answering back, but it isn't vocal.
What then is involved in the long and arduous business of training the show jumper to be obedient and careful?
You have to remain a friend, and yet you have to have respect. You can't do nasty things of abuse, but you can put horses in the way of making little mistakes so that they're careful for themselves.
Back in Pennsylvania, Michael Matz's training puts these ideas into practice.
You can't make somebody something that they aren't. You're not going to make me a Carl Lewis, because I can't run very fast. Even if you hit me with a hot prod in the rear end, I'm not going to run. There's all sorts of things you can do to a horse to stop them from hitting a fence, but I've never known one method that's lasted very long. Usually it's telling you that the horse isn't very good. I do a lot of little jumps, but really make them learn how to turn and listen to you. Even 1-foot fence or a 2-foot fence, they can learn to turn over that, and you don't have to school them to death. Everybody tries to make it hard, and I try to do everything as simple as possible. You have a bad class, it's not the end of the world. Don't go change your whole stable, your whole training. You go to the next class and keep going the same way.
Although horses perhaps don't reason very well, they have marvelous memories. And the shared experience, having been through big Grand Prix, having both been flat out with their nerves stretched to the maximum, that's something that builds up a remarkable confidence and a remarkable intimacy. I would say that the average jumper would spend 2 or 3 years just learning his craft, learning to jump straightforward courses. And then he has to spend a couple of years going around the world, seeing different venues, seeing different variations of difficult courses. If you overmatch him early in his career, for sure he never makes the top. The true foundation for jumping performance is the horse's obedience and suppleness on the flat. Riders like Michael Matz take enormous pains with their flat work. They teach the horse to do all sorts of different things, to bend, lengthen, shorten, turn very sharply while still keeping perfect balance. And Michael spends much more time on the flat work than he does in actually jumping fences. The reason, of course, is that the real art of show jumping lies in riding the approach. And I would say that most knockdowns come from a fault during the approach rather than some defect in jumping technique or jumping form itself. It's the horse who honestly is the athlete. And the rider really has to be the trainer, father confessor, parent, but the horse has to finally do the work. And thus, the rider's physical strength is not a very important factor.
Jumper is a very delicate mixture of chicken and bravery. He has to be scared enough not to want to hit the jumps, but still brave enough and get down and try and jump them. If you put too much of the chicken in the mixture, he won't go. If you put too much bravery in the mixture, he knocks everything down, doesn't care. So that's where training is, just to keep that very delicate balance. And if you have done it right, the horse eye will synchronize with the rider's eye and see what the distance is and know to shorten or know to lengthen.
Paul Schockemoeller is of the same opinion.
There are so many different things a horse has to have as a show jumper. They have to have scope, they have to be brave, but they have to be careful as well. Brave and careful. That's a very difficult thing together.
The flat work in Paul's yard is mostly seen to by other riders, because Paul has so many other businesses to run. One of the ways in which his system differs from those of other riders is that every horse in the yard will spend 2 to 3 hours per day on the horse walker, as well as being ridden. Paul believes this is good for the horse's muscles, tendons, blood circulation, and even his bones. No training system could be more different from Paul's than that of John Whittaker and his equally successful brother Michael up in Yorkshire in England.
Get fun, John.
Their seemingly casual approach is designed to make the best use of what they have available and proves equally effective for them.
I think the facilities only make life a little bit easier. You can still do the same thing in your back garden, really. If it's raining, it's not quite so pleasant. Or if it's muddy, it's not quite so pleasant. If you're doing something you enjoy, you know, what more do you want? It's one thing getting to the top, but staying there is another thing. That's what I'm working on, staying there.
In the days when there were relatively few truly important shows, pressure on the horses was much less, and show jumpers really could last a long time. Today we have major competitions the whole year round, and a primary concern for every rider is wondering how long his present string of horses is going to last and where the next ones are going to come from. Show jumpers used to spend the time between shows practicing or resting, and today instead they spend it looking for new horses and training young ones.
It's a partnership together, and unless your horse is working to help you, well, you're fighting a losing battle, really. And very often you can make a mistake, and if he's a nice horse, yes, I'm going up there, you know, and he'll try that a little bit harder and clear the pole, and you win the class, everybody thinks, my God, he's a super rider, when in fact the horse has saved you from making a silly mistake. It's your job to know at all times when you're riding, practically where every foot is on the ground. It's my job to get him to the spot where he takes off, to have his rhythm right and the pace right and his shape in himself. And after that, it's up to him to carry me over. The jumping part to me is terribly easy. It's the approach that's the difficult part.
The top show jumper is obviously a very rare animal. What are the qualities a rider looks for in a potential world beater?
The really good horse is composed of a lot of different ingredients, and if any one of them is outstanding enough, it can cover deficiencies in other areas. He needs strength, of course, not necessarily the kind of strength it takes to jump huge puissance walls, but enough strength and scope to cope with a variety of big fences. He needs considerable agility and gymnastic ability, and he needs a lot of courage and willingness to be pushed right to the limits of his ability. But most of all, he needs the kind of temperament not necessarily an easy one either, that will let him produce his very best performances under the very toughest circumstances.
How does the rider set about finding a new horse? Many people are intimidated by the prospect of the horse dealer, but yards like those of Charles Edwards in Shropshire still turn out quantities of young horses with good potential every year.
We sell a lot of young horses each year, 50, 60 or 70 young horses for sure. His value is what you can make of him. When I started off as a young man, you'd buy a nice horse for £500. A good novice today is worth anything from 10 to 15,000. It's his brain and his heart is the most important thing. Things you can't see.
You walk in the yard and somebody pulls it out. You feel something. You see something in the eyes or in the look of a head. It's special. It's like falling in love. It's indefinable.
I still prefer the grey one.
It's like myself. There's a bit of snow on the roof, but there'll be plenty of fire in the furnace.
You buy what horses you can find, and then you can go 2 or 3 years without even finding anything you like at all. I like a good back end. An intelligent head, his outlook on life wants to be nice. I like to see them when they leave the floor. You know, there's something magic when they leave. You know, they're like a cat. They come off the floor. They don't pound along. You know, they hear a good horse when he canters along on the ground. He just sort of just touches it, and you know, he's sort of cantering on air all the time.
Sure to make top class in capable hands. Well-mannered both in and out of the stable, and for sale through no fault of his own.
Another big problem in buying new horses is, of course, to find the money. Corporate sponsorship has helped for some lucky riders, but for others, the auction room offers a cheaper, if riskier, way to find new prospects.
Top horses are always hard to find because there's so few of them. Animals like that I would probably compare to the sort of chap that walks on a tightrope. It's a facility of the mind, really, more than physical, I believe. You're looking for an animal with a very special mind, an animal that actually wants, basically, to jump clean from the very beginning. If the animal itself doesn't really worry whether it knocks a fence down or jumps it clean, you're on a lost cause.
For those with the time, money and space, a more systematic way of producing jumpers is to breed them, using mares and stallions who have already proven their worth. In England, there is no real breeding system for jumpers, but in Germany, it is a serious business. Paul Schockermoeller, for example, also runs a stud farm which brings his total number of horses to an incredible 500. Paul, unlike some horsemen, believes that horses show their jumping potential very young, and he jumps them free in the arena when they are only yearlings to see whether they are worth the years of training.
I will give him notes about scope, form, and so on. I believe the back is even more important than the front legs. If they hang a little bit with front legs, normally with age you can train them.
Paul's mass production operation to breed and develop jumpers is unique both in its size and its success. He reckons to sell some 200 or 300 horses every year, of which around 25 will be Grand Prix jumpers. Over in America, there is much interest in recent high-tech developments in the breeding of horses. At Hamilton Farms in Massachusetts, Meg Hamilton and Mary Lou Cabot have started a very sophisticated operation, transporting the semen of brilliant show-jumping and dressage stallions to mares all over the world.
Mary Lou and I both got very tired of shipping mares 1,000 miles to find a good stallion, and then the mare would come home sick and not in foal, and we would have spent $1,500 to $2,000 over and above the stud fee and have nothing to show for it. Just a normal artificial insemination collection. You have to be very careful of contamination and your temperature regimes. You can't use sloppy AI practice. In other words, you can't drop it on the floor and scoop it up and ship it because it won't live. But basically, you simply collect it and you just extend it maybe 3 or 4 to 1. Extender's like a nutrient fluid you put it in for the journey. Put it right in the equitainer and send it on its way. Many people read to Abdullah now with transported semen and to I Love You and Galubay. I believe that it's the thing of the future.
Once you have the outstanding horse, the key factor is how well he matches up with the rider who's going to ride him. And very great horses have sometimes spent long periods of time in unsympathetic hands, showing nothing.
You know, everybody rides slightly different, and very often you can get a horse that's gone a little bit careless for one rider. You can give it to another one, and it's sort of his computer system is different to the other fellows. The horse is taken out of his little bit of complacency, and he'll suddenly become very careful, purely because you've ridden him a different way.
To me, when I look at it, you're a 1,500-pound horse, a rider with an average around 150 pounds, and you're controlling them with 2 little pieces of leather in their mouth. If it's done wrong, it could be really disaster. And when it's really done right, it's really beautiful to see. It really is art.
From among the very best horse and rider partnerships, what exactly is it that distinguishes the winner?
Everybody can learn to ride. The gifted rider can do things that you can't teach. He perhaps has the sixth sense as to how much he can get out of the horse, and when asking for just that little bit more would be asking for too much.
You have to have a facility that tells you, if I forgive that mare that little habit, it'll give me a better performance. On another animal, that would denote total failure.
The gifted rider has also the ability perhaps to do things that are wrong and get away with them because the horse accepts it from him where he wouldn't from somewhere else. Mind you, I think that talent alone isn't enough. It has to be talent supported by an awful lot of hard work.
Even then, things can easily go wrong, and the sport is sometimes dangerous.
You've got to be brave. You've got to want to win. Which means you don't have to think about anything else but winning. You need to have a very sharp mind, great attention to detail. You spot that a turn's possible, or that other people have galloped too fast and can't turn back quickly enough. If you really want to win, you don't miss a trick.
The difficult thing about the jump-off is that while almost all the riders in the competition could presumably jump a clear round if time were not a factor, time is a factor, and they have to determine how big a cut they're going to take against the clock. That, in turn, is influenced by the position of the draw. If they have to go very early, you can either say, well, I'm going to go like a bat out of hell and hang up such a brilliant time that nobody can possibly catch it. Or you might say, well, maybe I'll just chalk up a clear round, and if it's pretty quick, perhaps I will put so much pressure on the horses that follow me that in trying to be faster, they will have a fence down.
The American team have been supreme at both the Olympics and the World Championships in recent years. Why should this be?
America, for me, is where it's at the moment because they train intelligently. Their facilities are fantastic. They don't leave a stone unturned. They put their whole being into that great thing of America, be a winner. Their veterinary side is way ahead. Their techniques in keeping horses sound, in treating injuries which are bound to happen. The whole spectrum is so much more tied up into one big whole. You have a training barn with lots of horses and good facilities, and the barn vet. If you ride for a barn, there's everybody there giving 101% for that barn to win a class.
Retard a little in the air.
They're not afraid to say that they go to a trainer. In England, it happens very little, on a formal basis.
Different things to take his mouth. You want a very firm contact.
George Morris is the best-known American trainer. As a young rider, he worked with the great Bertalan de Nemeth, a Hungarian cavalry officer who came to the States in the 50s and proved an immediate catalyst for the newly established US equestrian team. Since retiring as team coach, Bert de Nemeth has concentrated on course building, a field in which he also excels. Indeed, he built the course at the Olympic Games in Los Angeles.
Bert de Nemeth in LA tried something quite different. More technical, lighter poles, not such enormous spreads, using colour a lot to try and draw horses' eyes away from the top of the fence. Putting more onus on the rider and correctness of training. There's more and more realisation in the effect of multicoloured fences. Fences that merge into the background, for instance, exactly the green of the grass. The better the horse is trained, the better the chance of jumping such fences.
The challenge to the riders, it seems to me, in years to come will become increasingly a strategic and an intellectual challenge. You have to plan horses' careers. In tennis and in golf, we're finding that the best players recognize that they cannot go flat out 52 weeks a year. And I think exactly the same challenge will face the rider. You really have to manage horses' careers now, and indeed your own.
Compared to other equestrian sports like dressage, polo or racing, show jumping is very much a newcomer. Although not natural jumpers like deer or cats, horses have been required to jump fences ever since land began to be enclosed in the 18th century. At this stage, negotiating the fence without falling was the prime consideration, to enable the fox hunter to keep up with the hounds on the hunting field. not much attention was paid to the horse's comfort in trying to find the best way to ride over fences. European cavalries almost universally employed the traditional backward seat until the early 1900s.